Good morning, everyone. I'm Dana Ladner with the Kansas Department of Agriculture, and I want to welcome you this morning to our third webinar in our Growing Strong Together series. This morning, we are going to focus on workforce-related topics specific to ag employers, and I will now turn it over to Wendy.
Thank you, Dana, and good morning, everyone. My name is Wendy Mojo, and I serve as the State Monitor Advocate for the Kansas Department of Commerce. In my role, I support and advocate for strong services for our agricultural employers. And I appreciate you taking time today for this webinar focused on bridging the gap, retaining the next generation in rural workforce. Workforce retention is important to ag employers, and this morning, our speaker will examine how purposeful communication, workplace culture, and generational dynamics intersect in today's ag workforce. You will leave with practical tools to improve retention, reduce burnout, and build stronger bridges between generations in our Kansas workplaces. Now, before we get started, a few housekeeping items. First, all participant microphones will be muted by the meeting host. Second, if you have a question, please submit that question using the chat option at the bottom of your screen. We will be monitoring the questions during the presentation and we'll address them at the end of the presentation. And lastly, this session is being recorded and will be posted online later this week on the KDA website. Dana, I'm going to turn the webinar over back to you.
Great. Thanks, Wendy. I would like to introduce Thomas Eisenbarth, the Kansas Farm Bureau's 2025 Rural Minds Matter Young Applicant of the Year. Some of you may recognize Thomas's name. You might have read an article or two that he's had published in the Grass and Grain. To me, Thomas is a lifelong friend. His life. As he went to school with my children, so I have known him pretty much since he was in kindergarten. Thomas, why don't you go ahead and join us this morning?
Thank you,
Good
Dana.
morning.
Yeah, good morning.
Good morning. I am so looking forward to this morning. And we have about 25 minutes to talk about workforce retention in Kansas from a different perspective. I know over the past few years, labor shortages in Kansas have really been a hot topic. And I want to ask you, as we're going to get ready to get started, what if workforce retention is actually a human issue? So I want to set the stage with that, is workforce retention actually a human issue? But before we jump into my question, I want to start by giving you a few minutes to add some additional information, introduce yourself, and set the stage for us.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you. Nope. Like you said, I grew up in Northeast Kansas in Onega, with Dana Ladner as my second mom, baseball games, 4-H, all of it. But simply just a Kansas farm kid at heart. But over the last few years, just kind of the way that I view the world, I have ended up kind of exploring the human side of Kansas agriculture. And like you said, that first showed up in Grass and Grain, just kind of scribbling down some thoughts. And as we start to look at workforce retention, this has been a big focus, a lot of my work, because it seems like every conference we go to, that workforce retention or a struggling labor force, it's usually first on the ballot, it's most talked about. But it really, really struck me how as a business owner and as a manager of people, it feels like everything is so out of our control, like just every single thing day to day. But today we're going to talk about some things that are well within our control, just as far as if we're going to talk about a struggling labor force. What if we first focused on what we can control and what we can take care of? If we can take care of what we do have here in Kansas, whether that's an employee 10, 15 years that's been with us, or if it's a young person coming right out of high school or right out of post-secondary, how do we handle those differences and how do we communicate across generations to retain what we do have here in Kansas? So that'll be done in the next half hour. Just some really, really practical, non-clinical. Obviously, I'm not a therapist. I'm not a doctor by any means. But if we can just come up with just 2 or 3 practical ways to connect with our employees and really set ourselves apart. Because if we are able to connect, that's going to put us above and beyond most employers. So being able to just connect and explore that human side will be the agenda for this morning.
Well, good. Let's just go ahead and start this off. Pretty much just chat between the two of us with it. Those that are on this morning, please enter any questions that you have for Thomas in the chat, and we'll look at those as we go on. So we've talked briefly just a little bit on this. So why is now the time to talk about workforce retention from a different point of view? Really is workforce retention a human issue?
I think it is now more than ever. Just all of the thought that I've put into this. Technology is an awesome tool and it saves us on a daily basis. But if we look at from a generational perspective, the generation coming out of high school or out of post secondary is the first generation that has had one of these in their hands their entire life. So just the way that that affects processing, the way that that affects neurological wiring it's causing some real friction across generations. Because if we looked at a seasoned manager or a business owner, they didn't have a phone or a tablet in their hands their entire lives. So just the way that they process their expectations, their stress levels, all the things, it's just so different. And if we look at generational gaps through history, yeah, there's always going to be differences in generations, but I don't know that there's ever been one wider than what's existing right now. And I think technology has a big part of it. And it's like I tell everybody, we're the most connected we've ever been as a society, but we're also the most disconnected. And so those disconnections are causing business owners and managers of people not issues, but just some things to work through. So just the technology piece, and then just the differences in pace and generational frequency. Just this gap has never been this wide before.
So we can look at turnover, disengagement, some frustrations across generations in the workforce. So what I'm hearing is what worked for decades doesn't automatically work anymore. So help me understand what's happening below the surface.
If we look at whether it's burnout, stress, I mean, just kind of appearing checked out, just all of the things that normally an employer would have a problem with. If we reframe that a little bit, and if we look at those as signals instead of problems and bad things, then we can kind of use those signals and get to the bottom of what the issues really are, get to the root of the issue. And more times than not, it's not going to be laziness. It's going to be miscommunication or misalignment. And if we really had some ways to structure conversations and sit down and connect across generations, I think we could probably get to the root of the issue and get it figured out.
So you touched on a few of this on, perceptions, but what are some additional ways some of these show up in the workplace?
If we looked at, like we said, just continual friction, miscommunication, just some preconceived biases across generations, and those biases go back and forth. If you're a 19-year-old, you probably think one or two things about your manager that are obviously not true, and then that manager, the way that they view that young person, just kind of getting those preconceived notions out of the way and really digging into things. And then if we look like appearing checked out, absenteeism, just at the end of the day, just good people leaving unexpectedly. And if we're going to keep talking about a struggling labor market, we can't have the good people leaving unexpectedly. We have to be able to figure that part out.
So we've really set the stage pretty high going into this. And I know we've got a lot of meat to really dig into. Now we've got about 15 minutes to really dig into some practical uses of what's going on. And so let's hear from your perspective on what you've learned over the last year going into things. I know that the Farm Bureau, recognition was, a great honor, and I know you've really taken the last year to dive deeper into things, and one of those is this workforce issue. So help me and help those that are on, really find a couple of tangible things as we go on retaining today's workforce, knowing that we've kind of set the stage already.
Yep, absolutely. And you know me, I work in analogies and I'll get it. Yep, I'll get a smile out of you there. But the best analogy that I could think of to describe this is, and I mean this in the best way possible. I don't mean this derogatory, but people are the machines of a business, of the manager. So to be able to view those humans as tools, if we look at an analogy of one generation being a 1967, just a Chevy C60, just a plain Jane pickup, 1967 being the year it was made. And then this other generation that we're dealing with, if we looked at them as like a 2005 Ford uh, diesel truck, it's not good, it's not bad, it's just different. But if we looked at their maintenance and what they require on both ends of that spectrum, they're both gonna obviously require some fuel. You're gonna need to change the oil, put some tires on once in a while. But the biggest difference that we see between those two vehicles is the electrical or the wiring. Like, how does that machine take in information? How does it make changes? How is that machine wired? So, to be able to use that analogy, we can really start to think about the different wiring of the two generations, whether it's expectations, whether it's work-life balance, just what a good life feels like for those two different machines. So to set up kind of that analogy, if those two machines are on either side of the table, there still has to be some common ground in the middle. And to be able to communicate, whether you're the C60 or whether you're the Ford diesel, uh, validation and vulnerability are going to be two great ways to start any conversation and to connect opposite ends of that table. Where a lot of the work I do, I call it V squared. But if you can validate someone's experience, and then if you're vulnerable with that person, those two things right there are going to connect bridges and just be able to get to the root of this issue. Because if you can connect that way, and I had some notes here, but connection is not softness, it's infrastructure. And like I said earlier, if we're going to keep talking about a struggling labor market, then we need to protect and build infrastructure for what we do have to keep what we have. So to say that one more time, connection is not softness, it's infrastructure. And it's going to go a long ways, kind of diving into this issue. But like I said, the V squared, the validation, the vulnerability, and then just having a basic understanding of the two experiences on opposite ends of that table. Where one generation, they were raised by people that survived the Depression, they survived the 50s, they survived the 80s, and to have respect for those experiences. But also, young people, whether they're coming out of high school or coming out of post secondary, they've also had some decent challenges in their lives and they've gone through some pretty wild world events. So to have a basic respect and a basic understanding of those two opposite ends of the table. And then the easiest way and the simplest way is to just simply celebrate small wins consistently. I mean, no matter what the generation is, who the person is, just to celebrate success consistently can go a long ways connecting and bridging this deal too. And one more time, connection is not softness, it's infrastructure. So to really hone in on that connection piece.
I want to back up to your V squared.
Hmm.
Um, ag industry, we are on the go. We are talking over radios to others in our business. We are dropping a text message. We are all over, whether that is in a business, with it, the banking industry, sales,
Yep.
farming,
We never
ranching.
we never stop.
We never stop. And so, let's think about that validation piece. I'm working for you, and I'm over here doing my thing because this was on the whiteboard of what was ready to go on our list of stuff that we need to get done this week. How do we check in with each other? How do we know? Because if I just get my work done and that's about it, how do I receive that validation from someone when we are so busy to make sure that, I feel good about myself, I feel good about working here, I'm not going to leave the keys in the pickup, walk off and have you send my last check. So tell me a little bit more on this validation piece, how we can be more intentional.
Yep, and intentionality is the word, and I'm gonna agree with you too. It's hard because if you think about a co-op or fertilizer business or anything of that nature, like it's go, 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 go. But to be intentional and just carve out 30 seconds, whether it's first thing in the morning or if you can get your team together before everybody takes off. I know busy seasons that's not going to be possible, but just being painfully intentional about face to face 30 seconds, just a quick conversation is going to pay dividends as far as retention. Because, I mean, even if you're just sweeping the shop, if nothing else, if a manager came up and talked to you and just gave you 30 seconds of their time, you're going to know that, hey, that guy's busy and he took 30 seconds out of his day just to check in on me and see how things are going. Like those conversations go a long ways in connection. And then at the end of the day, obviously workforce retention, but intentionality is the word of the day.
Got it. So now I'm going to jump into that vulnerability piece. Across generations, it either is or is it is or it isn't. So, how do we work more collectively and connected without being over the top?
Right.
Again, it goes back to intentionality, but how do we open up a little bit to get the door, that crack in the door to start those conversations? Is it on a management side? Is it on a new hire side? Is it in the middle? Is it everybody? How do you start without being perceived that because my mental health awareness and I went to a meeting and heard Thomas speak, or we watched this webinar, and now I need to be vulnerable to my employees or with my employees. Help me.
Yep. And I understand what you're saying. I think the words that you were probably looking for were genuine and authentic. Like, how do we be genuine and authentic in that situation? Just let your human side shine just a little. I mean, I think as managers and as business owners, we feel like we have to be just professional all the time. Like, we don't even want to crack that door because it's going to cause more issues. But just that quick check in, and then if that person is like, yeah, I've got this and this going on, it's like, like I've been there too. Like we're all human. Like it's okay. If you need anything, just let me know. Like just something as quick and as simple as that. But yes, being genuine and authentic is very important because people can sniff it out if you're not.
Yeah. So these are just little steps. I mean,
Mhm.
validating. I mean, it's nothing more than sometimes just talking to somebody, even if it's
Right.
just intentional when meet them when you're going from one vehicle to another vehicle, or you're talking on the radio, just, hey, I appreciate what you did, or thanks for reaching out to so and so on an issue, or if you see them at the grocery store, your employees or those that you work within, it's just that intentional saying hey, because I mean there are lots of times where we're nose down into a phone, even when we're out in public with that.
Yeah.
So I want to circle back to my opening question to you on just really your take on wrapping some of this up, that what if workforce retention is actually a human issue, which we've established that yes, it is a human issue. We've talked a little bit about your B squared on it. Give me 2 or 3 minutes of your time on just a little bit more that those that are on are gonna be watching can take for some additional steps as we work to retain our workforce in our state.
Yep. And that'll be a great segue from the conversation that we just left. You were talking about being genuine and authentic. Something that an analogy that stuck with me is working in dials, not switches. Because if you hop off this webinar and if you go jump into a team meeting and if you just start turning off switches, turning on switches, and just kind of going nuts with it, like you said, it's just going to be a different perception. But these little small increments, if we can just kind of fine tune the dials across the board, uh, it's not rocket science and it's not these big, scary, swinging changes. It's just small, little incremental things like just taking 30 seconds, checking on somebody, taking care of your people. It's gonna pay dividends. So
Good, good, good. Anything else you want to add before we throw it back over to Wendy to see if we've got some things in the chat? And again, we've got a small group on this morning, so we're pretty open to having some additional dialogue with our participants. So anything else you want to throw in before we go from there?
I don't think so.
No shameless plugs. So we're good. All right. Wendy, what do we have going on, or what questions might you have picked up from this morning?
How do you get your staff to, I know we talked about being genuine but where's that fine line of building that rapport, but and not getting too personal with them, but keeping that fine line of not being, you want to be friend and you want to be vulnerable, but you also don't want to open up the floodgates either. So keeping everyone productive and still comfortable in talking to you.
Yep, and it is a fine line. And I will say, when I was talking about dials, not switches, we don't want to start just flipping switches. We want to take that dial and the smallest increments that we can. And I mean, as a manager and as a business owner, it's an acquired talent, but being able to just use the smallest of increments with those dials and very slowly kind of open up that faucet a little bit is going to be advantageous. So smaller changes the better, because those small little incremental things will work out, but a little bit at a time.
What is one of the number one things that, with the turnover and trying to keep the retention, is there some like a common denominator that employers are finding this is it? Is it just the communication, or is there anything else that employers could be thinking about too?
I think it's just simply expectations, like different expectations across generations. Because I don't know, the younger generation, it always kind of gets joked about, like needing a safe space or work-life balance or just those types of things. But it's real. Like those expectations, if you can meet them or even just show that you're trying, I think it'll go a long way. But I think it is those just different expectations for what a workplace should be, what a career should be, what a job should be, just different expectations.
Gotcha. Well, thank you for that. There's no other questions in chat, Dana. Don't know if you have any other final thoughts. And thank you for that, Thomas, by the way. Thank you, because I did take a lot of notes. So this has been very helpful for myself. So thank you very
Good,
much.
absolutely.
Oh, good. Thomas, we have a few minutes, and I told you I wanted to keep it short when we were talking about this, and I've rushed you through things. So you've talked to a lot of people in the last year. You've spread the message, you've kept it simple, you've kept it practical. What are a couple of things that you learned from participants, employers, employees while you've been on the road, or doing Zoom webinars, podcasts, etc., your Grass and Green articles, you've morphed in your writing on that. You know, what's one thing with it You think about that for a second.
Yep.
On that then. We have I'm going to the chat with it, we'll reflect back with it. So, one of our participants wants to know, do you have any suggestions for maintaining work-life balance in agriculture?
Just finding little pockets throughout the day to just take a deep breath, move your body. Just it's gonna have to be intentional and it's gonna have to be small little times because we all know in agriculture, like we talked earlier, it just never stops. So being able to get to a place where you can be intentional and just carve out little pieces of time, that really goes a long ways. And it's tough. I mean, in a I'll call it a normal job or a normal career, it's hard enough, but to be involved in agriculture in any capacity, it's tough to find that break and to find that balance. But just intentionality, using your time wisely goes a long ways.
So a lot of this in any career, Thomas, we've got on paper, we can take 2 15-minute breaks during the day and we have an
Yeah.
hour for lunch. And what is that percentage that actually does that? And so minimal. So, intentionality on this work-life balance, would that include you suggesting even more to take those breaks, to step away from your desk?
Absolutely. And I think like it goes from a stress issue and a nervous system issue and it turns into health issues really quickly. So it's absolutely essential that we do that.
Great. We'll circle back then on my question that I started to ask you about, what are some things you've really picked up that led you to this workforce piece? We've got some other pieces that you've done on some mental health and agriculture, but this workforce piece is new. What's something that you've picked up as we wrap this up that you want to share with us?
Yep, it is amazing. I mean, if you think about people in agriculture, just the toughest of the tough, just calloused people. But it's amazing when you open up a little bit personally, how vulnerability draws out vulnerability. If you can just make somebody comfortable and just let them talk and let them share, it is amazing the amount of people that actually do have connections to emotional well-being and mental health. Like it's blown me away the amount of people that have personal stories and have connections to just how we take care of our minds and ourselves. But that's been resounding, eye-opening.
Right. Our emotional well-being is, like I say, a 5 second here, a 10 second here. How you doing? Nice to see you. Hope you
Yeah.
had a great day. How are the boys? How are the girls? How are things going with it, that intentionality? So, to wrap it up, you talked about validation, vulnerability. You would think by now I would not be stunned.
It's a tough word. It's a big word.
You need to find a different one for that second B so I don't stumble with it. But so give us your high points on those two and then we'll wrap it up.
Just like I said, let that humanness shine just a little bit. Let people see it. Treat people well. And when people are treated well, you'd be surprised the amount of loyalty and the amount of work and effort that they'll put into a business or an organization. So that little piece of humanness goes a long ways.
Really helps with workforce retention across all
Yep.
generations and keeping people in our state. So appreciate your time this morning, Thomas, and everything that you brought to the table. Again, congratulations on your 2025 Farm Bureau something. That's it. Had it earlier. It's a different place in my notes, but we look forward to the great things that you're doing. And I know those that are on will be able to follow along with it and how you go from there. So, Wendy, on behalf of the Department of Agriculture and Department of Commerce and members of the Nurture Kansas Ag Collaborative Coalition, thank you. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you for those that are with us today. We appreciate that. Our final webinar will be next Wednesday morning at 7 a.m. Cassie Stoner with the U.S. Department of Labor, Wage, and Hour Division will be presenting information on wage and hour compliance under the H-2A program. So we look forward to having everyone join us then, and have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you.